I wrote my paper on globalization and culture. The People's Republic of China has gone through several extreme changes in the past decade. They are now considered the export platform of the world. The United States receives almost all of their imports from China. China has not only gone through severe economic changes, but also social and cultural changes. Globalization is dramatically changing Chinese culture and is leading to both cultural homogenization and hybridization. Homogenization has taken over many parts of the world but has heavily influenced China. Homogenization is when normal local cultures are being replaced by global culture norms. Throughout China, I can just think of a few examples. One simple example might be the clothing that the Chinese citizens wear, to something more serious as eating disorders. There are a few agents that contribute to cultural globalization. The changing culture and globalization has a lot to do with the new media and technologies that are surfacing in China. Beijing and many other populous cities in China have become booming with major corporations, and these corporations are not just Chinese. There are also major Fortune 500 companies that have started right here in the United States. This in turn has changed Chinese culture drastically. Western culture is unfortunately thought of as the shallow culture. We tend to focus on wealth, physical features, and social status. Money and materialistic objects are what is coveted by Americans today. Unfortunately, the invention of the internet has been a huge contributor to the transfer of these shallow values from country to country. Chinese culture used to focus on the idea of family. With westernization happening so quickly, these values are disappearing very rapidly. A key example is the infamous McDonald's that we've talked about so much this semester. Watson states that as of June 1999, McDonald's has opened 235 restaurants in China. Hong Kong alone boasts 158 McDonald's franchises. That is one for every 42,000 residents. It'd be very interesting to find out how many McDonald's franchises are now open in China in the year 2009. The same as in the United States, the Chinese go to McDonald's to enjoy French fries, burgers, and a Coke. One thing that caught me by surprise when reading the article, China's Big Mac Attack, was that grandparents take their grandchildren to McDonald's to treat them. However, the grandparents don't eat the food served at McDonald's themselves because they know it is unhealthy for them. This yet is another key component of homogenization taking place. Another example is in Truth's book. He explains that I'd observed many Chinese had assumed Western names. It turns out that people in China choose Western names because there are so very few Chinese names. Truth is referring to a Chinese woman named Cinderella that he met before boarding a train. Now, I don't know about any of you, but I've never met one single person in the United States with the name Cinderella. It's just not something that we would typically name our children or people that we are close to. Although this really doesn't have a lot to do with culture, it really does play a role in homogenization as a whole. A third example of homogenization is China adopting and celebrating Western holidays. However, China does not take into effect a lot of the religious beliefs that come along with the holidays that we celebrate. One of the articles that I read stated that Western holidays celebrated by Chinese are a bit tweaked, of course. Most times, imported festivals serve as an excuse to throw a party with friends or with family. The pictures I'm passing around, you will notice, look extremely similar to the holidays and stuff that we celebrate here in the States. So things such as holidays that people in the West take so seriously are being transported and celebrated different ways throughout other countries. Music, television, and the internet are the gateways for the transfer of cultural values. With the majority of the populated cities in China and the United States having access to the internet, they are able to share ideas, values, and experiences. People can now easily access everything that has happened around the world. In the article, It's a Hip-Hop World, it tells the story of how one man introduced hip-hop music to the youth in China. During his first week in town, he went to a nightclub that advertised hip-hop music, but the closest thing to hip-hop was a really horrible Michael Jackson impersonator. So Burton embarked on a mission to bring the real thing to the Middle Kingdom. People, such as immigrants, also contribute a great deal to homogenization. Creative outlets, such as the one I just mentioned, allow for homogenization to take place. So although these things ultimately play somewhat of a role in homogenization, there are more serious things that play even bigger roles. Not only major clothing brands, restaurants, and things such as television companies are being brought to China, but also unrealistic portrayal of the human condition. Popular television shows in the Americas are being brought over to China. One that rings a bell when I first started talking about this was the TV show America's Next Top Model. This television show focuses success by emphasizing external physical features and downplaying any intellectual achievements or academic achievements. This type of TV show emphasizes these shallow Western values that I have mentioned before. So all of these things play a role in the globalization of China and around the world. Hybridization is the idea that local cultures and ideas are being transported around the world and that people in these cultures are using ideas to best suit the culture that they are in. As much as I think that homogenization is occurring more frequently, I am also seeing a tremendous amount of hybridization happening in the United States as well as in China. One example was the assignment we did on Chinese food. When Americans think of the traditional Chinese food, the actual Chinese know nothing about. An example is the fortune cookie. We have taken these basic ideas from China and transformed them into foods that the Americans would enjoy. So things tend to change within the culture that they are in. Equally, people tend to bring to their culture things that they think would enhance or better what has already been established. So a second example of hybridization is the transference of a cultural entity, however, not necessarily using the entity in the same purpose. Another example we talked about in class was the use of fast food restaurants like McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Starbucks. We think of those restaurants as a place to grab a quick bite to eat. However, people in China use these places as a social gathering rather than a place to grab a meal. So, people, places, and things all get utilized in ways that best suit the culture that they're in. Homogenization and hybridization have both pros and cons. One positive point that can be seen about homogenization is the fact that if everyone adopts the same culture, maybe this world will become a more peaceful place. We will be able to speak the same language and therefore communicate ideas more clearly. However, if the culture that spreads the widest is westernization, then old, cherished cultural values will soon lose and diminish over the generations. So, however, westernization does have some solid and meaningful cultures of its own that would benefit the rest of the world. Westernized people are the ones, Westernized people are always the first ones on site for any natural disasters. However, if this was a globalized concept, then certainly the conflicts would be reduced. Hybridization also has positive and negative points. Cultures would become much more efficient if prioritized. A negative aspect of this is that the true meaning of things within the culture is totally missed. Therefore, the cultural entity has no value itself. The United States is going to continue to travel around the world to peripheral countries looking for cheap labor. When they find it, then the country is going to become an export platform just as China did. The country will then be well on its way to become developing and adopting popular ways of the land of the free. So we have established that homogenization and hybridization occur everywhere around the world. They have both positive and negative effects on the culture they inhabit. Hopefully, in the future, we will still have a diverse nation with unique cultures, and as the saying goes, it takes all kinds to make a world.